gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Kiersten Downs from Student Veterans of America's Board of Directors.
I feel like that was happy. My name is Dr. Kiersten Downs, and I am thrilled to be joining you today at the first general session of SVA's 11th Annual National Conference. I am grateful to be able to continue my service after all of these years with the organization as a member of our Board of Directors, and I am boldly dedicated to making sure that we uphold our organizational commitment to fostering an environment where diversity and inclusion is supported and practiced in our national programming and at the chapter level. Thank you. I want to start off by pointing out that when people say the word diversity, they mean it to often be synonymous with women. Women may be the largest group in the general population that aren't well represented. However, they are not the only group. There are other marginalized groups, and the issues and barriers that they face when participating in military-connected spaces needs to be a part of the conversations that we are having when talking about D&I. I am a firm believer that talk is cheap without action to back it up. Diversity, and better yet, inclusion, is everybody's business. Oftentimes, well-intentioned chapter leaders come to me and ask, Kiersten, what can I do to make my chapter more welcoming and inclusive? As I stand here today, I am personally asking for all of you to take the following message home with you and share it widely, practice it, live it, and breathe it. Remember, we are all in this together. First and foremost, I want to say to every single person sitting in this room with me, we welcome you. We welcome people of any gender identity or expression, race, ethnicity, size, nationality, sexual orientation, ability level, neurotype, political opinion, religion, or culture. We welcome all military-connected people regardless of branch, unit affiliation, service connection, combat, or non-combat. We welcome military families and civilians, activists, business people, artists, writers, doctors, ordinary people, extraordinary people, and everyone in between. We get excited about creativity and innovation. We are excited about the dream makers, the doers, the out-of-box thinkers, all of the people who want to change the world, and I know I'm sitting in an entire room full of them. We think accessibility for people with disabilities is a priority, not an afterthought. We believe in being inclusive, welcoming, and supportive of anyone who comes to us with good faith wanting to build a community. We might not always get things right the first time, but we care so much about you and promise that if we get things wrong, we will listen carefully and respectfully to you and do our best to make good on our mistakes. If you have ever felt left out, marginalized, like you didn't belong in military-connected spaces, please hear me. We welcome you. My journey with our organization spans over 7 years. It started when I was a grad student as a member and president of my local chapter at the University of South Florida. I stood on a stage similar to this one, competing in our business plan competition. I traveled to leadership summits, filled out scholarship applications, served on our National Advisory Council, and was awarded Student Veteran of the Year for 2013. Thank you. One of my proudest memories is riding my bicycle into our nation's capital after completing a 3,800-mile cycling campaign that raised over $50,000 while advocating for support for student veterans in higher education. Over the years, I have personally observed our representation of chapter leadership expand and diversify. When I first started with this organization, I said that I wanted to see more than half of SVA's chapter leadership be made up of women. I am so proud to report that we have almost hit this mark with women making up 47% of chapter leaders across the country, even though, that's right, 47%. We're gonna hit 50 over the next year. Even though they are 26% of all student veterans and 16% of the overall serving force. We know intuitively that diversity matters. It's also increasingly clear that it makes sense in purely business terms. Research on diversity by McKinsey & Company found that companies in the top quartile for gender or racial and ethnic diversity are more likely to have financial returns above their national industry means. Although, we also recognize that achieving greater diversity is not always easy, as even companies most respected for their D&I practices still struggle with the representation of women and people of color in executive leadership positions. Now, I might be biased in my approach, but I can stand in front of you today with complete confidence and conviction and say that women student veterans are a likely population to draw from to help close these gaps. You will be hard-pressed to find a more qualified pool of candidates ready and willing to take the reins and lead your organizations to the next level. In talking about D&I, it is important to recognize that women and ethnically diverse student veterans earn their degrees at higher rates than their peers. I lost a page. That's terrible. Oh, then their peers that have never served. Give me one slip up. There's a lot of you out there. African American and Latinx veterans are earning their degrees at higher rates at every level, from associates to bachelor's to advanced degrees. Student veterans are diverse, regardless of gender or ethnicity, diverse in services, in experiences, in expertise, and coming from all socioeconomic backgrounds, with nearly 2/3 being first-generation college students. They've worked with diverse people in their own services and in multinational service around the world, working with people in many countries who speak many different languages and with many diverse cultures. They've thrived in service, and now they are thriving in college, in their chapters, and they will thrive in their careers. This is truly a remarkable population to recruit from, whether for internships, jobs, while they are in college, or as they head out into the workforce. So I know I only have my 5-minute time limit, so in closing, as you know, SVA really depends upon its corporate partners to be able to offer programs like this and others. In fact, this afternoon's general session is sponsored by Raytheon. And in speaking about Raytheon, I would like you to now welcome Ryan Pitts, U.S. Army veteran, Medal of Honor recipient, and financial analyst for Raytheon, to make a few remarks.
Dr. Downs, you know, you're out of the military. You don't have to do PT anymore. You don't have to bike 3,000 miles. There's sure easier ways to raise money. I absolutely loved my military service for a lot of reasons. You know, that sense of purpose of having a mission. I reveled in the challenges that I faced physically and mentally. But what I loved the most, and has stuck out to me the most since I've left, was the camaraderie, was the brotherhood and sisterhood of being around other individuals that cared about me more than they cared about themselves. It was an amazing experience. When I left New Hampshire at 17, I got exposed to people that I generally didn't get to in my town. And to deploy to Afghanistan with people that came from all different countries, ethnic backgrounds, races, religions, and to see us come together as a team and understand that we were stronger together than we ever could be apart. That the things that made us different were really just the things that made us unique. That different didn't have to mean divided. Not that there weren't lively discussions. Some of my favorites were between the devout Christians and the atheists. You can imagine how that knockdown, drag-out fight went. But you know, when that conversation was over, we all put on the same uniform and we turned around and went out and were dedicated to the same thing. That's hard. That's hard to leave, right? To that sense of belonging. I've never felt so comfortable anywhere being myself as I did among my brothers there, even though, you know, as varied as we were in our beliefs and backgrounds and everything. But we can't forget about that experience and what we learned from part of that team when we leave that. when we move on to other things, whether it's college or the corporate world or whatever it is we end up doing. I know I made a mistake when I went to college. When I got out of the service, I originally signed up for 4 years, got stop-lossed, for anybody familiar with that wonderful experience. Got wounded, had to do a year of Walter Reed, and by the time I hit my 6th year, I couldn't do it anymore. Fine, I'm getting out, I'm going to school. I was ready to attack school like it was my job, my new mission. I wasn't there to make friends. I was to show up, get an A, and leave, get my 300 on my PT test or higher, whatever, and move on from there. I was still clinging so strongly to my norms of the culture that I came from in the military. Like, if you're not 10 minutes early, you are late and probably should elevate your feet back there somewhere. If somebody's talking in the front of class, that's the person leading. Doesn't matter whether they were a private or I don't know what the other ranks are and whatever your low enlisted are in the Navy. Doesn't matter if they're training you. You're listening. But I remember sitting there in class and seeing some of these kids come in, right on the dot. I'm like, oh, I almost had a vein explode, right? Or falling asleep, or I would see some of them maybe not giving 100%, 110%, 150%, right? It used to drive my wife nuts. I attacked. I'll spend time with you later, honey. I got to read this book and type this paper. It's not going to type itself. And so I mistakenly looked down on these students. I thought they were lazy or whatever, other adjective you could probably think of, until I tried to start seeing things from their perspective and actually get to know them a little bit. So I went to the University of New Hampshire at Manchester, which was the commuter campus. So a lot of, that's right, represent Wildcats. That's it, right there? Okay. That it being a commuter campus, a lot of non-traditional students, a lot of students that chose to work full-time and put themselves through college. It's tough to say, but they didn't have the luxury, I guess, that I had of relying on my GI Bill to really focus my studies the way that I did. That was a choice that they made, to not be able to give 150% on their grades. A C or a B was acceptable because that meant that I could pay my tuition, that I could pay my rent. Right? They weren't lazy. They were prioritizing. They were the furthest thing from. They were showing up to class tired. That was a failure on my part, to not appreciate the experiences of my fellow students and take the time to understand them. We've been there, we've worn the uniform, we know what it means to accept people from all different walks of life. We don't care as long as we're all on the same mission. My advice to you is don't forget about that, whether you're in school or when you go to your company, because we are stronger together. Different doesn't mean divided. And this country, more than ever, needs us to come together regardless of what we believe or where we're from or the color of our skin or who we pray to. So just remember that as you get ready to take that next step out, to appreciate the value that everybody brings to the table, that different perspectives can yield better outcomes. So, with that, now to our session for today. Our first panel is on inclusion in higher education. This panel will be moderated by Lauren Augustine, Student Veterans of America's Vice President of Government Affairs. Joining Lauren for the first segment of the panel are Dr. Kiersten Downs, Interim Assistant Vice Chancellor for Diversity of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and Dr. Gerard Clancy, President of the University of Tulsa. In fact, we've invited Dr. Clancy to speak briefly before the panel begins. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Gerry Clancy, President of the University of Tulsa.